Violation of these laws can lead to serious punishments, wherein that people are just causing these kind of processions. This is basically a result when there are situations when laws are not being followed properly. Now my next question, that do laws apply to all? See, when I talk about a democratic country, we say that nobody can discriminate anybody on any basis, be it caste, sex, religion, whatever. So that means that if there is a law that has been applied to all the people that are living in that country, so that means the law should apply to all. But does this really happen? So I say that laws are equally applicable to all the citizens residing within the territory of the country. No discrimination can be made on any basis. The rule means that all individuals are equal before law and no individual can be above the law, and this rule also applies to all the citizens of the country, but also to all the government officials and to the other people who does not come under the category of the government employee. Any crime or any violation of this law has a certain punishment, and obviously it has either the person is put behind the bars or maybe there is certain penalty which the person has to pay. You can also understand it as a fine, there are rules, there are traffic rules, and when we don't follow those rules, what happen? We are not put behind the bars, but we have to pay a amount to the police, to the traffic policeman. So there are two ways of dealing with the violation of the laws, that either there is a punishment or there are the penalties for all these things. Role of Britishers in creating rule. It is thought that it was the British people who, when they came, they created the law in India. According to many historians also, the colonial laws are arbitrary in nature. That means, arbitrary means that they are different when it comes to different people or different when it comes to different situations. Indians criticized them and protested against these laws which were made by the Britishers. And then when we got freedom, at that time also it was realized that now these rules should be changed, because now India is a democratic country and that all the rules should be equal for everyone. But what was the role of the nationalists who helped us in getting the freedom? So in the 19th century, there were several lawmakers who were basically Indians, and then they began to develop and demand respect in the colonial courts, because at that time, though we were we were about to get the freedom from the British rule, but we were not completely independent at that point of time. So gradually we started putting our points that just on the basis of the difference in the skin color, you cannot discriminate us and you cannot insult us. Moreover, the law has to be same for whites and for the blacks, because foreigners are very white and our skin color is comparatively less white than them. So we commonly refer to them as white and us as blacks. They began to use laws and defend the legal rights of Indian. Now they were actually misusing these laws. For example, there was an act, the Sedition Act 1870, which permitted the government to detain or arrest anyone without a fair prosecution in the court who was seen criticizing or disputing the British authority. Now what happened was, while we were fighting for the freedom, at that time, since we actually were criticizing for n number of things that the Britishers were doing with us, any point of time they see any Indian indulging in any such activity which was thought as a threat to the existence of the British people, they used to detain that person for as much period of time as they wish to, and that too without presenting that person in the court. So that was basically not the right process. The moment you hold someone, you have to present that person in the court within some 24 hours of keeping that person under your custody. But then the Sedition Act of 1870 was actually allowing the Britishers to not to follow certain procedure, and then they were willing to do whatever they wished to. Therefore, the Indians played an important role in the evolution of the legal system in India. So finally, after this discussion, I actually wanted to make you understand this thing, that though we always say that the law system was introduced by the Britishers, but the way you see the law system of today is far better than what it was during the colonial period, and the credit for improving it goes to the Indian nationalists and not to the Britishers. So, how did the new laws come about? The Parliament played a vital role in making laws, but how Parliament get to know that laws are required? Because there are certain set of people who are sitting in the Parliament discussing the things, discussing whatever is happening outside, but they are not facing the same problem as we are facing, and therefore how do they know that this law is needed? Now, there are various ways through which Parliament get to know this, and what they are. First of all, issues raised by different sections of the society, protest by the people on road, voice of the citizens, which can be either through radio, through newspapers or through TV channels, role of TVs and newspapers as I have already discussed, and the role of Parliament now here is to solve the different problems which the citizens are facing. What are we going to do now through this comic concept? We will understand that how the issue of domestic violence came to the knowledge of Parliament and ultimately it became a law. So, in October 2006, these two ladies are talking. There is a picture of the newspaper and they say that the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005 passed. You see, there is a number, year number that is mentioned with each law or act. So, what is that basically? That is the year in which that law was passed. Like I told you, the Sedition Act 1870, so it was passed in the year 1870. Now, this law, the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005, that means it was passed in the year 2005. So, what they are talking is, Sajia, did you read today's newspaper? Isn't it a great day for women? Now, they two are, after looking at the news in the newspaper, these two women are very happy and they are discussing that, wow, it's a great day for us. And then the other women, she says that not just women, violence free homes will benefit everyone. So, they are having an ongoing discussion and they are saying that it's not just about the women, but it is like, you know, a happy thing for each one of us. Then in April 1991, a typical day, now these two ladies are actually reminding a day they had faced, that a lady came to them and she said, I need advice that my husband beats me. I haven't told anyone so far and I feel so ashamed. I can't go on like this anymore, but I have nowhere to go. So, she came and she highlighted the issue that she was facing. Then there was another lady and she said that I am being ill treated by my son and daughter-in-law. They verbally abused me. That means one was physically abused and the other one was verbally abused. That means you are not touching someone physically, but the kind of the language you are using for that person to address that person is really hurting. So, that is known as the verbal abuse. I have no access to my bank accounts. They may even throw me out. And then these two ladies are saying that I don't want to go to the police, but I just want to stop the violence. And the old lady who says that she was being troubled by her son and daughter-in-law, she says that I don't want to be thrown out of the house I am living in. Now, this lady says, unfortunately, the existing law is a criminal one and does not offer these options. So, throughout the 1990s, the need for a new law was raised in different forums. Now you know, women from different backgrounds, they came up and they highlighted the day-to-day issues which they were facing. Like two are the examples which we discussed, and there are several of such kinds. So, when the ladies they started coming and discussing and highlighted their issues, the need to have such an act was felt. So, we have heard testimonies of several women and we have seen that women want protection against being beaten, the right to continue living in a shared households and often temporary relief. We need a civil law to address the issue. So, basically there are two types of laws, one is the criminal law and one is the civil law. Then in 1919, many lawyers they collected and people who are actually interested in all these things. There can be activists also, there can be students also who were studying law to just be knowledgeable, and then they took a part in drafting the Domestic Violence Prevention and Protection Bill. So, before any act is made, first of all a bill is made, it is known as bill, and then this drafted bill was actually widely circulated. What happened in this bill was the definition of domestic violence should include physical, economic, sexual, verbal and also the emotional abuse. The law should cover any women living within a shared domestic space. They should be protected from being evicted from the shared households. And then there was one lady who was sitting and then she said, okay, what about the monetary relief? Shall we write this also? Because in a bill, whatever you feel like that all these points should be included while it is an act, those all pointers are written and then it is circulated on a wide scale and people are asked to sign it. Now what happens, that meeting was held with different organizations and the women's movement want a new law on domestic violence. The government should introduce it to the parliament soon. And finally that bill was introduced in the parliament in 2002. But now the bill has none of what we have been suggesting. We must oppose the bill in its present form because they have written the pointers, they want it to be there, but then the parliament and other people modified it accordingly. And when these group of ladies, they just went through that paper and they saw that whatever pointers we have written are now missing from it. So then they thought protest as a remedy for it, and let's have a press conference and we should also start an online petition. Several women organizations, national commissions for women made submissions to the parliamentary standing committee. And what did they say? That esteemed members of the parliamentary standing committee, the present bill must be changed as we do not agree and all the pointers that we wanted are not there. So the law needs to provide the temporary custody of children. In December 2002, the standing committee submitted its recommendations to the Rajya Sabha and these were also tabled in the Lok Sabha. The committee's report accepted most of the demands of the women's group. And then finally, a new bill was reintroduced in parliament in 2005. So see, it is a long procedure. They started way back and then from 2002 to 2005, basically 3 years it took for the people to decide, to frame, to include all the things, and finally the act came. After being passed in both the houses of parliament, it was sent to the president for his assent. Assent means his permission. The Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act came into effect in 2006. So basically in 2005 that was passed. It actually was like as an act, but then it was put into effect from the year 2006. And what happened, like in the press conference, these all people are discussing. So we have understood that how it begins. Now, you know, there is a discussion that is being happening. Now what happens was that domestic violence acts in order to ensure the protection of women were implemented to protect women from being mistreated and wounded by their husbands or any male member of the family, because our society being a patriarchal society, being man the only dominating person in the family, they generally physically abuse the females of the family, considering them to be inferior, which actually nobody is, because if male are going out of the family to earn, females are taking care of the house, and that's how the society was designed. So if one person is earning and if the other person is not earning, that doesn't mean that the other person is inferior. And nowadays the scenario has totally changed. Nowadays men and women, they both are earning. In some families men are not earning but females are earning, and then they are managing the household chores also. So we should respect the person irrespective of their caste and irrespective of their earning status. Moving on, the domestic violence issue was brought to the parliament where it became a law and finally it was implemented in 2005. And it is not only some certain people, but obviously citizens, they play a vital role in helping parliament to maintain their laws. The voice of citizens was heard through newspapers, editorials, television news, biography stories, meetings, and there are n number of ways you can always show, express, tell your inconvenience to the concerned people, and if you keep on nagging, it certainly reaches them and they take an action on the concerned matter. But there are certain unpopular and controversial laws also. In democratic India, people can express their feelings and willingness to accept the laws that are made by the parliament. Sometimes a law made by the constitution can be legal and valid, but becomes unpopular and unsatisfactory to people when they feel that the purpose behind making this law was harmful or unfair. Now, when do you think this kind of thing, that this law is not a very familiar and friendly law? What do people do? Basically, they either do public meetings or they do protest. And how do they do this? Or generally they show their inconvenience their ill feelings through televisions, newspapers and other modes of media. Then when a large number of people they feel that the law passed by parliament is wrong, then they force the parliament to change it. What happens is law is equal for each and every community or group, and keeping this thing in mind, the law should not be one such that favors one community but harms the interest of another community, and that is the reason when the person of that other community they protest, the parliament has to do some amendations in it. If a law is not in regard to the constitution, the court has the ability to declare it null and void, or maybe it can modify it as per the needs. Now, what is the role of citizens in this? In India, the role of citizens is that first of all we are electing our representatives, that is through elections that we have discussed and read several times. To properly make use of newspapers and media, that means we have these medias as the fourth pillar of democracy and we can always express our viewpoints, be it about the good things or be it about the bad things. Watch out for the work done by the elected ministers and find out the fault by their actions if required. Now, here comes the story of Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks was basically an Afro-American woman, and after coming back from a long day of work, she was sitting on a seat in the bus, and then a white man came and he asked her to get up and offer the seat to him, because the black people were not allowed to sit in the front seats, and this all happened on December 1st, 1955. And she said, no, why should I get up? There are so many seats left there in the bus. You can go and sit on some other seat. Why I do have to stand and give my seat to you? And when she refused, actually huge agitation just happened in which Afro-Americans were treated, because Afro-American people were actually already irritated. And when this happened, there was like a huge agitation. This came later on to be known as the Civil Rights Movement. And because of all these things, a Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, religion or national origin. It also stated that all schools would be open to Afro-American children and that there would be no longer any discrimination and there would be no separate schools for whites and blacks. But despite this, a majority of Afro-American continue to be among the poorest in the country. Most Afro-American children could afford only the government schools that had fewer facilities and poorly qualified teachers, in comparison to white students who either could go to the private schools or live in areas where the government schools were highly rated as compared to the private schools. So, what's the conclusion? That the parliament of a country plays a significant role in the formation of laws, and that all the people in the country are treated equally before law. As a citizen of a country, it is our duty to be involved and recognize about the different laws of the parliament. We have to be very vigilant. You know, we cannot think, okay, we have someone to take care of all the things, like the way we are very relaxed when we are at home, because we know that mom and dad are around and that is why we don't have to be bothered at all. But when you grow up, be very responsible citizens and just keep a watch on the things that are happening around you and be responsible for whatever change you think there should be, because even one person voice can bring that change, as happened in the case of Rosa Parks. And this helps them to function as representatives properly, because when we tell them that this thing is going wrong, so it helps them to use it as a guide and change their course of action, which ultimately benefits not only us but to a major section of the society. The citizens have the right to approach the court regarding the laws which they see that it is unjust, and the court carries the power to either modify it or to declare it null and void. Most important point which we have almost every time discussed is that the law cannot discriminate the citizens on any basis, and no one is placed above the law. If a law turns out to be unpopular and people find it unacceptable, they can approach the parliament to take it. So, ultimately, after having this long conversation about the laws, when I sum up, what I want you all to do is, as I have already told you a minute back, maybe 2 minutes, that we have to be very vigilant, open-minded and have to have eagle eyes, wherein we are keeping our ears open and just keeping a watch on the things which are happening around us. And wherever you see that there is something wrong happening, don't wait for that thing to happen the next time. It's good to be patient, but not when something wrong happens with us. So at any point of time you see something wrong happening with you or the people around you, find there are n number of ways of dealing with that situation. And I know, being the good citizens, being the responsible ones, you have the capabilities to do that. With that, we wrap up today's chapter. Thank you.
To watch the complete video, download the Upbind educational app from Play Store and App Store.